Good morning, everyone, and good morning to. I'm trying to find the camera and my light. So, but I'm just going to speak to the people in the room, and if you're joining virtually, thank you for joining us virtually, and I hope I do not have my back to you. I'm Mark Fowler. I'm the CEO of the Tanenbaum Center for Interreligious Understanding. Really is a pleasure to have all of you with us in person and all of you joining us virtually. So just a little bit of history about this event and a little bit of history about the organization. So the mission of the Tanenbaum Center for Interreligious Understanding is to combat religious prejudice, to promote justice, and to build respect for religious difference. Those are three of the areas where we locate our activities. And in particular, we look to work with individuals and organizations to transform attitudes and behaviors towards prejudice, fear, and bias. That's what our mission is. That's the work that we do. And regarding this event, several years ago, with the support and the guidance of Ted Childs, we began to convene senior leaders within diversity, equity, and inclusion, chief human resources officers, senior executives, general counsels, as well as those people who are deeply committed to religious diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace. And the first couple of meetings were high-level closed-door meetings. They were not open to the public because we were really looking to see what were the strategic things that we needed to discuss in terms of the future of religious diversity in the workplace. But we realized over time that we needed to open that pool of people and open that brain trust so that we could work together and present information to senior leaders more of the 30,000 feet as well as the 6 inches off the ground view of how do we address religious diversity in the workplace. So we're very glad to have all of you participating today. This session was scheduled several months ago, and so the war between Israel and Hamas and all of what is happening in the world makes this more poignant, more critical. But I also think that, and I have to think, because if I don't think this way, then the work that we do on a daily basis doesn't make sense. Because I have to think, and I know, that there is something on the other side of this that we may not be able to give language to, we may not be able to even feel our way into it, but there is something on the other side of this. And we all will have something to do with that. You may come away, hopefully, from this morning with a few more questions than answers. And that's not a bad thing. Because if we stop inquiring into how to make the difference, then we're done. If we stop trying to figure out how to build religiously inclusive workplaces for people of all faiths and none, all the time, not just in times of crisis. If we stop doing that work, then we're done. So your presence here and the time that you're etching out in your calendar to be here to participate in these conversations, take them back to your companies, share with your colleagues, and hopefully implement some things really does mean a lot. It matters, and we're really glad that you're here. So what else do I need to do? Okay, so I wanted to have to acknowledge our sponsors, Cushman Wakefield, who introduced us to Pride Global. So this beautiful space that we're in, want to acknowledge both Pride Global and Cushman Wakefield for making this space and these resources available for this meeting. Had the opportunity to record a podcast, which I guess is coming out at some point next month. Oh yeah, because now we're in November. So there's that whole dynamic of now it's only 6 weeks until my cruise. So that's how I'm marking time. You got to hold on to what works for you. Got to get through. What else? Please make sure, so we don't have any scheduled breaks through the morning session. So please take care of yourself as you need to. Coffee and food remain available. The bathrooms are immediately outside of the front door, so please make yourselves comfortable. And I think with that, I'm going to turn this over and introduce our host, Kamala Harris. Kamala, oh yes, oh yes, and yes, okay. So, Madam VP Kamala Forbes, Global Director of DEI at Pride Global. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. As Mark said, I'm Global Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Pride Global. I've been with the company for about 2.5 years now, and really excited. I met Mark, I guess, on a tour here, but like I said, being introduced by Cushman Wakefield, and I was just really intrigued as we sat down and talked about the work that Tanenbaum is doing in the space of religious inclusion. And I was happy to be able to host this event, happy that you all are here to learn more. And like you said, the timing of this couldn't have been any better. So really happy to have everybody here. Short and sweet, but thank you all for being here and look forward to learning more with you.
Thank you, Madam VP. So now I'd like to introduce Dario Hunter, one of our workplace program associates, who's going to introduce our first session.
Morning, I'm Rabbi Dario Hunter, Workplace Program Associate with Tanenbaum, and it's my pleasure to introduce this Fireside chat, where we'll continue the conversation we started at our spring summit about recent legal decisions and the changing landscape of employment discrimination as it relates to religion in the workplace. We're joined by Keith Sonderling, a commissioner on the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission since 2020, with a prior tenure as the acting and deputy administrator of the Wage and Hour Division at the U.S. Department of Labor. Commissioner Sonderling has also served as a lecturer at George Washington University Law School. Holly Weiss is a well-respected mediator with nearly 3 decades of experience in employment and employee benefits law, including workplace discrimination and contract-related issues. She's a member of a number of mediation panels and rosters, including for the district courts for the Southern and Eastern Districts of New York and for the New York Supreme Court. I'm sure we're all looking forward to an enlightening discussion of their insights on the intersection of law and religious diversity in the workplace.
Great, thank you, Dario. First half of my page is done already, so that's very good. Good morning, everyone. As Dario said, I'm Holly Weiss. With me is EEOC Commissioner Keith Sonderling, and we'll just dive right in. Although there is no fireplace here, but just wanted to mention that. I think, let's start with talking about what's going on at the EEOC. What are the statistics lately?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me again at the Tanenbaum Center. I really enjoyed what we did last spring. And the reason we're doing this today is because there were so many facts and details and cases and areas we wanted to get into, and we'll be able to do that today. So just talking broadly before we get into the religious aspect of the state of discrimination in the United States. The EEOC
You cannot sue your employer in court without, whether you work for the private company, the federal government, or state and local government, without coming to the EEOC. So we are in a good position to see what all the trends of discrimination are nationwide. So last year, we got around 765,000 inquiries of discrimination. Now, what does that mean? That means just phone calls to our offices, people showing up, emails saying that they believe that their employer discriminated against them. Now, not everything is discrimination, as you all know. So we have to sift through all those and see which ones are actually actionable based upon a protected characteristic such as sex, race, national origin, religion, age, disability, etc. Not that, oh, my boss is making me work when I don't want to work on the weekends, and there's a lot of work going on right now that mean to me. That doesn't necessarily qualify, but we have to go through that. So out of those 700,000 plus inquiries, there's around 73,000 actual charges of discrimination. That means the employees are actually filing a federal case against their employer. And of those, and I guess we should make it a little interactive because it's the first session this morning. What do you think the number one claim of discrimination is in the United States? Anyone take a guess? Sexual harassment? Anyone else? I have no prizes if you win, but so the number one claim of discrimination in the United States is retaliation. So that is over 50% of our claims. And the reason because of that is that, you say, oh, I wasn't paid fairly, or this person was promoted. Yes, you were, and you're fired, or now you're being paid less. So we see a lot of claims of retaliation when somebody actually brings a charge to their HR department or makes a complaint. So because that's a tag-on charge to other charges, we'll do it again. What is the number one underlying cause of discrimination taking out retaliation? Nope. Keep going. All right.
Okay.
Disability discrimination. That is the number one charge of discrimination, the number one claim of discrimination in the United States year after year. And that's two parts. One, it's people not getting the accommodations that they requested, or that they just weren't hired or fired because of the disability that the employer has to accommodate. So taking that aside, then it's harassment, race, sex, and sex is very broad. That includes pregnancy, it includes LGBT discrimination, and obviously gender discrimination as well. And then religious discrimination was 6, and we're going to talk about that at length because it's not normally that high. Then age, then national origin, then discrimination based on color, then pay discrimination, and then genetic information discrimination. So that's just the overview of where employment discrimination is as of last year in the United States.
I have a feeling that's going to change over time, but the trend is what it is right now. So what are we seeing in religious discrimination?
So last year was an historic year when it came to religious discrimination. We've never seen the kinds of claims related to religion that we saw. Now, don't forget, employees have around 300 days to file with the EEOC after they were discriminated against. So now we're seeing a lag from some of those COVID cases. So like I said, out of the 73,000 charges of discrimination we got, which was an increase from the year before. And let me just address that. So in fiscal year 2021, sorry, I got the fiscal year, the math is not, I'm a lawyer. So in fiscal year, because we're always like a year behind on the stat. So fiscal year 21, we got around 61,000 charges. Fiscal year 22, which is our last reported year, we were at 73,000. So that was almost a 10,000 charge increase from the year before. And just the state of discrimination, I should have addressed this before. We were consistently getting in the 60,000s of charges of discrimination, and it was going lower and lower. If you compare that where we were in 2010 to 2012, when we saw a lot of those claims coming from the recession, that was consistently around 100,000 charges of discrimination. So discrimination charges have been down significantly. There's a few different ways to look at that. I look at it that, HR departments have been really empowered, and especially after the Me Too movement, of having the open door policies, of revamping their policies, and just corporations through DE&I officers and HR departments really making sure that employees have a place to work that's non-discriminatory. Others say, well, it's down because the economy's good, and instead of going to HR or the EEOC, when before there's no other options because we're going to get a job, somebody can just go get a job remotely, paying more money, and they never actually bring that charge. Or people say, well, look, retaliation is your number one charge of discrimination every year. People are afraid to bring cases to the EEOC or to HR. So whatever the reason is, those numbers were down. But last year we saw a spike, and that was really just based upon religion. So religious charges increased from fiscal year 21, where there were around 2,100. In fiscal year 22, that was almost 14,000 charges. That's a 654% increase in religious charges in 1 year. And so what is the reason for that? Obviously, that's really related to COVID. And that's the big impact of COVID. And so many people were always asking us, well, how did COVID impact the workforce? And now we see COVID impact the workforce related to religious discrimination significantly. And obviously, that really relates to what we're seeing related to those mandatory vaccination policies or vaccination policies. So that's it. It was significant. Look, a 654% increase in 1 year related to those charges. And look, there were a few big cases in the news about large employers mandating the vaccine and not having the religious exemptions in it. But if you look at it, where it was challenging and where really the work you're doing here could help and still helps is for the first time outside of certain industries, like healthcare, for instance. In hospital systems, they're used to dealing with accommodations related to religious objections to vaccinations because doctors, nurses, other medical professionals have had to get mandatory vaccinations in those industries, whether it's the flu shot, meningitis shot, whatever it may be. They're used to that. And what we've seen is that those areas where they have these mandatory vaccination or medical requirements, they've set up committees where they'll have religious committees and they'll have disability committees not to get the vaccine if it's against their religion. So you've seen hospital systems really have these complex organizations where you have representatives of all different religions where they outsource that to see if that accommodation is genuine or not. But now, when the COVID mandatory vaccination policies happened, whether it was just the employers requesting it or local governments, or we saw the federal government, was requiring it, every employer in every industry for the first time had to question their employees' faith, how to deal with their employees' faith. And HR departments, in various industries have never dealt with that before. And, the law, where it's so tricky in this area, as you all know, it requires the HR departments, if they want to not grant that exemption and actually question their employees' faith, to make sure that it's a sincerely held religious belief. And I think a bigger problem was we had every major religion come out and say, get the vaccine, right? I mean, you saw most major religions came and said, get the vaccine for health, safety, whatever reason. It doesn't violate the religious tenets, get it for the community, whatever, we're hearing various messages. And that was really tricky in a sense where then none of that matters when it comes to religion. And you can't have these large swath policies saying, okay, well, if you're Catholic, you can get an exemption, because we've read about some of the exemptions related to getting the vaccine for that religion. But if you're Jewish, you have to get it. But that just doesn't work because the law requires for religion, because it's obviously a fundamental right, is that it's on an individualized basis. So now, you have employers with hundreds of thousands of employees, and a lot of these employees wanting not to get the vaccine based upon religious grounds. You have to do that on an individualized basis every time. So you may have people of the same religion, one saying, my religion encourages me to get the vaccine, and then somebody else coming to HR and say, my religion does not allow me to get the vaccine, and it's the same religion. And you have to look at that individual person's sincerely held religious belief, which may be different. And that was such a significant challenge for HR departments to do that individually, but that's what the law requires. And where it got really tricky is there were a lot of employees who had gotten other vaccines within the company. A lot of large organizations have the food drives every year, right? Come get a food drive or get a gift certificate somewhere, or we're doing it at the office. And employees have been documented getting the vaccine, getting other vaccines, and suddenly they didn't, want to get the COVID vaccine for religious reasons. So that's where really you have to dive into the individual assessment of that employee. And where it got even trickier was two things. One, there were a lot of employees who suddenly became very religious when they didn't want, when it came time for the mandatory vaccinations. And some employers may know those employees well and say, well, we know you do things on social media that are not very holy, right? We're going to not give you the back, no, nice try. And, then they were coming and buying a $30 certificate from the Church of the Internet, right? Remember those? If you saw those online, saying that that this person shouldn't get the vaccine, quoting some scripture, and literally downloading a PDF with their name from the internet that they paid $30 for. Is it on? Yeah. Oh, sorry. You hear me better now? Okay, sorry. I'm back. So, that was really a tricky thing. Now you have this certificate from a priest on the internet, and what do? Right? And you really have to take that. And then it got even more difficult because some individuals didn't like the effects they got from the first shot. So you actually had claims where employees would get the first shot of the COVID vaccination and then come back and say, well, I found God between the first and second shot. I don't want to get the second shot. But what do you do in that scenario? I could, right? I mean, so you see how complicated the analysis was. And so that is really why we saw these significant uptick in claims. And, the other issue too is that a lot of the individuals didn't want to get the vaccine because, well, if I don't have the vaccine, that means I can continue to work from home, right? So you can see that's really where you would be allowed to challenge that. And that's where, the EEOC was put in a position. And what we did, because of the great public need, we released our own form that we use for our own employees to question them about a religious accommodation. We gave it out to the public, and we had never done anything like that because that's where all the questions were coming in. And, we said basically, here are the questions you're allowed to ask. And it can be an analysis that continues. So if somebody says, I want the vaccine exemption because of my religion, and then you find out they're doing things that contradict that, you can go back and remove that because it wasn't necessarily done in good faith. So this was just a really incredible, difficult time for employers who had never done this before. And a lot of employees also were coming forward and saying, well, my political party doesn't allow me to get the vaccine because you can't force me to get a vaccine. Or I do yoga 3 times a day and only eat at Whole Foods, and I don't put anything that's not natural in my body. You're done. You have no, that's not, unless you can prove it's a religion where, there are some cases of that. Generally, that's the first time you came through and then you say, I meant my religion, So employers did have power in this, but it was just an awkward position for most industries that we've never seen before. So that is really why that spike in cases happened. But it shows you how quickly something like this can happen. And the reason why you need that infrastructure related to religious accommodations, related to respecting those individuals' religions, because maybe if some of these companies had these more sophisticated religious exemption policies in place, maybe if they had talked about it before, we wouldn't have seen all these claims come through.
So I think I want to add, this is why you guys are here, right? Tanenbaum offers a lot of help in this area, helping employers with religious accommodation requests, et cetera. And we are going to be learning, we already have resources from the EEOC, but we are going to be learning a little more. I know that you may not know this, but the Southern District of New York mandates mediation early in every single discrimination case. As a mediator, therefore, I'm seeing a lot of them, and the vaccine cases are now coming through. And all of the things that the commissioner just mentioned, I'm hearing. And I'm hearing the employers say, yeah, you just wanted to stay at home, or, you wanted to collect unemployment, all kinds of things. And then, questioning beliefs.
Their faith.
Their faith. Really, and I'm hearing that from the plaintiff saying, this the most horrible time of her life. She truly believed it was against her sincerely held religious beliefs to get a vaccine.
And look what you're being accused of in these situations as an employer. And again, outside of certain industries, we've never seen these kind of cases in other industries, like professional services or other kinds of jobs where they never had the need for any kind of religious exemption. And now these corporations that for the first time, they're getting these cases related to the mandatory vaccination, and they're basically being accused of not respecting their employees' religion. And it's really not, obviously, it's not a good look either. But this is not, these are not new protections. These are just infrastructures that corporations can have, and maybe having these mandatory vaccination policies and our correlating cases has elevated this too for organizations to take religious exemptions, and we'll get not just for the vaccine but other accommodations more seriously in building that infrastructure.
All right, so I know you want to talk about something that we all want to hear about, which is EEOC cases, settlements. What is the EEOC doing, or have you done in the area of religious discrimination at work?
Bringing a lot of cases, and the facts of these cases, which I want to go through some of the more recent cases we filed. I mean, some of them filed even it's not October anymore, last month, just to show that religious discrimination in the workplace and failing to accommodate religious beliefs is still a significant problem. We're still filing a lot of lawsuits. So people always like to hear the facts because I know everyone in this room and listening online that you obviously take this seriously, and you wouldn't believe this stuff occurs, but this is what we see across the country. So just last month, we filed a religious and race discrimination retaliation lawsuit against a trucking company for subjecting an employee in Ohio to harassment because of race and religion, denying him a religious accommodation, and retaliating against him. So we claim that the company subjected the former employee to frequent severe harassment because of race and religion, and denied him Saturdays off at work, which he requested as a religious accommodation. The EEOC alleged that the harassment by the company personnel included the use of racial slurs and other derogatory terms. The former employee complained about the harassment multiple times during his employment. The company did not take any meaningful remedy to remedy the harassment, prevent future harassment. And then in September, we filed a religious discrimination and retaliation. You see how they're kind of tagged together against a national restaurant chain for a hiring manager's harassment of teen worker for wearing a hijab, and for the company's retaliation against her after she complained. The EEOC was alleged that the team was forced to resign because of the discriminatory treatment. So here, the team was employed as a line server in Kansas during the summer of 2021. An assistant manager began repeatedly asking her to remove her hijab or headscarf, pressuring her to show him her hair. Despite the team's rejections and complaints to management, the restaurant failed to stop the manager's harassment. The restaurant's inaction resulted in the manager escalating his abuse, ultimately grabbing and forcibly removing part of her hijab. After the team reported the incident, the restaurant again failed to take proper remedial action, so we brought a lawsuit there. In September, we filed, and this is just September 2023, so this is recent, we filed a religious discrimination lawsuit against a hotel for refusing to accommodate an employee's religious practice by forcing him to choose between his religion and his livelihood. There, the employee who worked as a concierge is a practicing Muslim who wears a beard as required by his religious beliefs. Soon after he was hired, he was told by his supervisor that it was a company policy that all employees be cleanly shaven. The employee requested an exemption from the policy to accommodate his religious practice. However, the company said, shave your beard or be fired. And then to avoid losing his job, he did shave his beard. Right? So we found out and brought the lawsuit there. And then also in September, we filed a religious discrimination case against a healthcare provider for refusing to grant full-time telecommuter or religious accommodation for the company's COVID-19 vaccine requirement. According to the lawsuit here, a supervisor of a clinical administration had performed her job entirely from home since 2018 and had no job duties that required her to meet face-to-face to enter the healthcare provider's facility. When the company implemented the COVID-19 vaccination policy that required employees to be vaccinated in October 2021, she received notifications directing her to receive the COVID vaccination, even though the company's vaccine policy stated it did not apply if you weren't full-time telecommuting. The employee informed her supervisor and HR department of her religious objections to the vaccine and filed 2 requests for religious accommodations, which she sought exemptions for. However, the company denied her request without any discussion with her and demanded she get the COVID vaccination shot within 30 days or be fired. She did not get the shot and she was fired. So there was a pretty basic COVID-19 cases where they didn't even want to have that discussion about the religion or accommodation. They didn't even engage in it, and they just fired her as well. A couple more COVID vaccination cases. In Pensacola, Florida, assistant store manager requested an accommodation exempting her from the requirement due to her Christian beliefs that she not get the COVID vaccine, and the supervisor said, that's fine, you don't get the COVID vaccine, but then we're going to strip your management title if you refuse to comply there. So pretty much not a great situation when you're saying that, yeah, okay, you don't have to get the vaccine, but then you're not going to be a manager anymore. Pretty difficult there. In Reston, Virginia, there was a case relating, again, another beard case. And according to our lawsuit, an employer repeatedly explained to the company that he did not belong to a formal religious denomination, but nonetheless held a Christian belief that men must wear beards. The company denied his request for religious accommodation because the employee was unable to provide additional substantiation of his beliefs or supporting statement from a certified or documented religious leader. And this is a really important case because here, he's saying that he's not part of a major religion, but takes beliefs from maybe multiple religions. And again, it's that employee sincerely held religious belief. So it doesn't need to be part of a well-known religion. It's just as long as that employee believes that sincerely. And here, he believed in various parts of other religions, and the employee said, well, go prove to us, that one of these major religions has these tenets. And they fired him for not doing so. So just, we have so many examples of this, and, I'll make sure to, because I have a lot, and they're important, and they're really, you should go back and read them. I'll make sure you have the links of it, so you can see what the claims were actually bringing in. The monetary amounts were recovering as well. So, a lot of this, especially for all of you who care about this and understand this, may think this doesn't happen. But even the most basic cases about the beards or religious scarves and coverings are still occurring all over the country. And we're still bringing these really, really simple, basic cases like the beard cases. Those came during COVID as well about, well, you have to shave your beard, even though you have it for religious purposes because, the PPE won't work, your face mask won't work. And in those cases we've had for decades in the healthcare industry where there are masks that work with beards. So, a lot of these basic themes you see in these cases continue to come up. And again, for HR departments that may not be dealing with religious accommodations, working with organizations like this, raising the bar will prevent these really simple, basic cases from ever occurring.
Yeah, I would just support that by saying in the federal courts, I'm seeing cases in New York, so we're not as woke as we may think, involving, police departments making people take their headwear off, women to take the mug shot, things like that, the grooming cases. We see them as mediators, meaning they're coming through the courts. So it's important, if you don't know how to handle something, to reach out to somebody who does, perhaps somebody at Tanenbaum or lawyers, your in-house counsel who also deal with these things on a regular basis. It's tricky. So we were talking about cases last time at the summit, since this is an extension. We all talked about the upcoming decision in Groff versus DeJoy, which is a religious accommodation case. I think we correctly predicted the outcome
Did you
at
think
the
it was going to
summit.
be unanimous, though?
No,
Yeah.
I didn't think there was a possibility of unanimity at the Supreme Court on any.
I know, it's really funny because you say, with the way the public perceives the Supreme Court, that everything is so political and partisan and they can't ever agree on anything. Well, they agreed unanimously in an EEOC religious accommodation case. I mean, it's just, in 2023. So it's pretty good wake up call for everyone out there how, this, religion in the workplace is not a partisan political issue. It is a bipartisan issue, no matter where you are. So again, the work here and other organizations internally within corporations related to religion in the workplace, there's no picking sides politically on this. It is, everyone agrees.
One thing I want to add, when you're dealing with these issues in the workplace on the ground, it is sometimes helpful. You're always working to have some kind of mutually agreeable solution, some accommodation. There's a little push and pull, and it does take an interactive kind of process. And I have to say, the toughest issues that I dealt with as a lawyer in this area, I usually asked the employee, can you tell me who is your spiritual leader? Can we talk to that person? Talk to the rabbi. The rabbi always has a solution. And I often work through things that way. So reach out when you have these issues. So we're about to get to, I think, kind of a tough issue. Mark mentioned the war. We can't not talk about it. It's important. So I'm interested, and I assume this group is interested in what have we seen already, and what do we expect we might see in terms of religious discrimination in the workplace arising from the war?
Yeah, here we are again, as we were talking about earlier. International and national events have now caused religion, religious beliefs, national origin, ethnicity to come right back in the forefront for not only the social, political conversations, but in the workplace as well. And, let's just kind of break this down between what is going to be impacted here from a legal perspective. And it's so complex when you're dealing with, wars, and you're dealing with religion, because it blurs between what protected characteristics come into play within that. So obviously you have now religion, but you also have national origin as well. I think that's where the line is getting blurred, between being Jewish and being Israeli, being Muslim and being Palestinian. So, it's more than just the religion. I think a lot of what you're hearing in the news is just related to religion, but the claims that are going to come potentially within the workplace for harassment, for retaliation, for discharge, failure to hire, what are they going to be? Is it going to be, is your policy against, well, of course, this is all lawful, these are just hypotheticals. I'm not going to hire, because what's going on in Israel, I'm not going to hire any Jewish people. Well, that's different than saying, I'm not going to hire any Israelis, right? And then there's a difference, that's national origin versus religion. The same thing, I don't want to hire any Palestinians. Well, or are you just going to say, I don't want to hire any, people of Muslim faith? So it's really complex. And I know this crowd gets it, but the majority of those who are going to engage in this discriminatory behavior may not see that differentiation. So you can see how it implicates a lot of different areas. And especially too, when you're dealing, with this issue, also color discrimination comes into play as well. Just because somebody, is Israeli, you may think that, well, that's somebody who wears, an Orthodox Jew, with the beard and the black hat, versus, there are Israelis out there that we see, or people of Jewish faith that, if you've been there, the Ethiopian Jews are, very, very dark, so you see color discrimination can come into play, perception, a lot of this can come into play. But, just taking a step back, related to anti-Semitism, we saw a rise in anti-Semitism, and I know this group has spoken a lot about it, well before this. There was a study in 2022, resumebuilder.com, where they interviewed hiring managers, and 26% of hiring managers say they are less likely to move forward with Jewish applicants. When asked why, 38% said Jews have too much power and control. 38% said Jews claim to be the chosen people, and 35% said Jews have too much wealth. So this was in 2022, before any of the current issues were coming up. And then earlier this year, the Anti-Defamation League also had a survey out, and U.S. respondents believe that following are probably true, that Jews have too much power, Jews are not as honest as other business people, and Jews are more willing than others to use shady practices to get what they want. And then the American Jewish Committee also had some findings about anti-Semitism. They said anti-Semitism has increased over the last 5 years. The Jewish Americans, by a vast majority, believe that, while the general population did not. Anti-Semitism is a problem. The general population said that 91% agreed. Anti-Semitism is a problem for everyone, not just Jews. The general population obviously agreed, but only 25% of the people who experience anti-Semitism, whether at work or otherwise, had actually reported that. So, when it comes to anti-Semitism in the workplace, for us, to learn about this, prior to the most recent events, which we'll talk about, which really brought it to national news, Jewish Americans, or just Jews in the workplace here, weren't reporting it. I think a lot because of those stereotypes that they are, in a better position than other individuals. So we weren't even seeing those cases, and that 25% stat kind of substantiated why it's difficult to get these cases. But now, since the war started, the ADL came out and said there's been a 388% increase in anti-Semitism, and that includes harassment, vandalism, and assault. And obviously, just looking at the news now, it's really significant, but it cuts both ways. After 9/11, the EEOC had to come out and talk, very seriously about Islamophobia and, about separating Muslim faith versus the news events that were occurring. And I think it's the same thing here on both sides of the equation, for Jews and Israelis, for Muslims and Palestinians. And I think it's just a very difficult conversation that we're going through again now. So from the EEOC, again, we sort of were ahead of this on the anti-Semitism. For Islamophobia and issues related to Muslim workers, we've had significant guidance over the years. Post 9/11 through, we updated it last in 2016 about those issues. And I think, you've all probably seen that at this point. It's been well discussed. But now, starting in 2021, we needed to give out more information about anti-Semitism in the workplace. So in 2021, we actually did a unanimous resolution condemning, at the time when there was violence, harassment, and acts of bias against Jewish individuals in the United States. Then in May of this year, we put out a fact sheet for anti-Semitism for Jewish American Heritage Month. And again, I'll make sure you get all the links to all the resources I'm discussing. We get very specific about accommodations for Jewish employees in the workplace. Basic ones such as schedule changes and leave, exceptions to workplace grooming policies, wearing a yarmulke, or other very specific practices relating to Jews in the workplace that there may just not have been an awareness of on the accommodation front. So it's, in a sense, here we go again. It's forefront for all of us, and especially when there is a war, how are we going to see these claims coming in? Where are these claims going to be? What are they going to look like? Are people just not going to be hired because they're Palestinian or they're Israeli? National origin discrimination. Are they not going to be hired because they're, outwardly Jewish or outwardly Muslim and related to employers thinking, well, we don't want to bring this war drama into our workplace? And I know that sounds childish, but that's actually what occurs. They just don't even want to deal with it. I don't want to bring, a Palestinian national into our workplace because it's going to upset our other workers. That's national origin discrimination. So the claims may be as simple as that, but I think now is the time to really go back within the organizations and go back and look at our new guidance related to anti-Semitism, look at our guidance related to Islamophobia post 9/11 in the 2000s, and make sure from the top that despite what's going on, which is you certainly have a political opinion on, that it's not going to be based upon any of your employment, any terms and conditions of your employment, hiring decision, promotion decision related to those issues coming into what we care about, but what we're duty bound to protect, which in this case is going to be religion and national origin. And as you all know, they're going to get inflated and mixed and matched between.
I want to give a couple of footnotes. Yesterday, the FBI, Ray, the head of the FBI, said the increase in anti-Semitic threats, 600%. Threats against Jews. And we're all seeing it. We're seeing it in schools. Saw it at Cornell in the last couple of days. There's no chance that this does not leak into workplaces. And I think as people at high levels in your organizations, your DEI efforts need to include religion. If they don't already, they probably do because you guys are here. But
exactly, and whether it's affinity groups, whether it's the support system needed for religion, and it's a good time with the anti-Semitism going, with the attacks against Jews, to not only raise the awareness of Jewish individuals in the workplace, but also again, all religion. It's just within the workplace, the protections, the not fearing of being harassed or retaliated because of your religion. But what we're seeing here across, New York City, if you just go on Twitter, the Stars of David's now outside of Jewish people's homes. That's going to creep into the workplace, to your point. And at what point are we going to see, graffiti in somebody's cubicle, about Jew, just like they're doing in people's apartments in these large cities, and if an HR is not empowered to do those investigations, to raise awareness that's, not only probably violating corporate conduct and code, but also can be discriminatory, those you can be rebuilding those policies and having those statements coming out across the board now, and you're starting to see some corporations doing it, saying we're going to support if you see some of these large corporations, they say we're going to support our Jewish workers and our Muslim workers that now may also be caught up in this. And I think now is really the time to get those statements out, to make sure that the employees know that they're empowered, that obviously this is not a culture of the company, but if it does happen, that you have an avenue to report it, and the company from the top is going to take it seriously and not allow what's happening on the outside of the employment context, that the discrimination, the violence that's occurring, it's just not going to occur in the workplace, and it allows the employees to feel safer.
Yeah, I know you all legally you have your sexual harassment policies, but if you don't have a policy that has a complaint procedure for unlawful discrimination and retaliation and harassment on religious or national origin bases, that should be something you push. I have a question here. No. I don't think it's necessary. I think this was the second footnote I wanted to address, which is we have already seen adverse employment action taken as a result of people expressing opinions about the war or what has happened. And, it's going to be, that's not illegal, right? If you think somebody does not, is not a good corporate citizen because they have expressed something that is against your company's values, it's okay to say you're out. However, it's going to be difficult sometimes to tease out what the actual basis for the decision is. Is it because the person is of a particular religion, or supported a particular religion, or is from a particular place, etc., versus this person, used corporate letterhead to say something terrible, so there's going to be things in the middle that are going to be hard to deal with. for employers. So I would say, like, I think it's very interesting to have seen some of the law firms that rescinded offers to law students, and they just came out and said, this is why we did it. And I don't know, as an employment lawyer, I would always advise my employers not to comment on the reasons for their decision making, because you never know how it's going to turn out.
Right, but then there's, to that regard too, there's a lot of pressure to do those things. And, you're also not saying that we're sending offers or we're firing these people because of that they're of this religion or that they're this national origin. It's essentially saying that we're doing this because they violated our code of conduct, which is differently. Now, in the enforcement of that, where it's going to be critical. So if you're saying, well, we're only firing people who are saying, death to the Jews, and if you say death to Muslims, and again, these are just hypotheticals, so I don't believe any of this, that we're going to enforce those policies different. So then that's where it can leave the conduct side and get into our world. We're saying, well, now you have these corporate policies that you are enforcing in a discriminatory fashion, versus, usually just say, if you want to kill somebody, you're not going to work here, right? You see the difference there versus, killing this group is okay, but killing that group. The corporate policy is about not moving forward with your beliefs about murdering people. So but it's all going to be intertwined. You can see where now is the time to really get ahead of this with manager training, with discussions with, even from the employees about where they can express their views. Because in the private sector, don't forget, there's no First Amendment right. And you really can't be using an employer, and nor should you be using your employer's resources to move forward your political messages. And that's what naturally we're going to start seeing out of this as this continues now. So I think we're still, in a good point where all of you in this room, working in-house, working with Tanenbaum, can start getting that training out to managers, start discussing that before it gets so intertwined where you're having HR managers making decisions on what side they believe is right versus wrong. So
we only have a few minutes left. We were going to cover, AI and affirmative action. It's way too much to do in what we have left. So maybe
we should continue the show and do it.
Yeah, we'll just
in the next time.
We'll do another extension of the summit at some point if you like. But there is a question here.
Can you hear it? Much for being here, and this has been really, really informative. We got a lot of great statistics on anti-Semitism. I'd love to know if there's any statistics that you have around anti-Islamophobia or anti-Muslim sentiment.
So we don't have the statistics I gave you were from outside groups that were done by surveys prior to what's going on. We don't have the actual breakdown of charge of discrimination we receive publicly about which religion has the most amount of charges that come in. Sometimes they do release it as part of a longer study, but the government with studies, it takes a long time to figure it out. So this is another question we're going to see now, just like COVID. In the beginning of COVID, everyone was saying, well, how did COVID impact your charges? We want to know right away, these HR departments want to get compliance, and we're getting the same questions now. How many religious charges are coming in for Muslims versus Jews versus Christians? So we don't release it that granular, but again, it's going to take a while to see if there's an increase in not violence, which is more reportable, which is what the FBI can do, but from actual charges, it's going to take 300 days from the incident, and it's not going to come in as I was fired because I'm Jewish, I was fired because I'm Muslim. It's going to come in as religious discrimination. Then we have to go through and do it. So it takes kind of sort of years to do to actually find out what the impact of this was, where, in 2020, late 2023 is really the first time I can tell you what happened to COVID when these claims were coming in late 2020, early 2021. That's just the way it works. But I don't know if there's going to be outside groups. The ones I gave you was done by the American Jewish Committee, by the ADL. So I don't know on the other side if there's going to be stats increase there.
So the AJC, by the way, Tanenbaum, Rabbi Tanenbaum was a big part of that. Just a little aside here, and I want to say that Tanenbaum is ready to help you all prepare for what I think we are all predicting to be a pretty steep increase in religious discrimination issues in the workplace. Anyone else have questions? We finishing precisely on time, 0-0. Well, thank you very much.
I do want to say it's great to come here and great work with you because this is sort of, looking in the crystal ball of where employment discrimination is going. I think when, we had the event in the spring, we could have never predicted now that, religious discrimination outside of vaccine, outside of these sort of newer, greater issues. Now we're going to get back to, unfortunately, it looks like old school religious discrimination, again, that we saw in the 2000s that, had certainly gone down by those numbers. So really now is the time to really start working internally and externally to get those policies and procedures in place, because I think after this conversation, we can all agree that these claims are coming one way or the other. So I appreciate your willingness to prevent discrimination as well.